Tonight's story is called The Quiet Piano in the Empty Music Room. It takes place in a school after dark, where sound lingers longer than footsteps. The school stands quietly after dark. The day has already left the building, leaving no trace of movement behind. Lights are off, doors are closed. Only the shape of the place remains, holding its position in the night. Long corridors stretch forward, not leading anywhere in particular. The wooden floors remember the quiet pressure of footsteps from earlier hours. Now they hold nothing at all. The air settles slowly, as if it has found its place. Classrooms remained unchanged. Desks stayed aligned, their surface empty and still. Chairs remained where they were last left, neither waiting nor expecting. Nothing has been moved. Nothing needs to be. Windows line the hallway, one after another. Most of them are fully closed. One remains slightly open, just enough to let the night pass through. The air moves slowly there, without sound, without direction. The building does not react. It does not adjust to the darkness. It does not resist it either. The school simply remains, holding its quiet shape, as it always has. Time does not stop here. It stretches. Always continue, turning gently at familiar corners. Each turn looks the same as the one before it. Doors stay closed along the walls, their handles untouched, their frames settled. The quiet does not deepen. It remains even, unchanged, steady. At the far end of the building, where the corridor narrows slightly, one room remains unlocked. It has been this way for as long as the building remembers. The hallway leading to it holds no sound, no movement, only quiet, resting in place. The hallway does not feel abandoned in the way abandoned places usually do. There is no sense of urgency in its emptiness, no sign that something was left behind in a hurry. Instead, the space feels preserved, as if it has been carefully held in place, protected from change by nothing more than time itself slowing down. The floor stretches forward without interruption, smooth and undisturbed. There are no fresh marks, no uneven scuff, no traces of shoes passing through recently. If anyone has walked here before, it was long enough ago that the hallway has already forgotten them. The walls remain exactly as they are, holding their pale tone under the steady glow of the lights. It is not a bright color, but it is not thin either. It exists somewhere in between, a shade that does not demand attention and does not fade into the background. It simply stays. The lights above do the same. They remain on without flicker, without sound, without variation. They do not brighten the corridor or soften it. They only illuminate what is already there, offering no emphasis, no suggestion of importance. The air in the hallway is cool, though not unpleasant. It rests gently against the skin, consistent and unchanging, as if it has settled into a temperature long ago and decided to remain there. There is no breeze to disturb it, no current to suggest movement from one end of the corridor to the other. And yet, some of the windows along the hallway are open. They are not wide open, not enough to let the outside world rush in. They are opened just enough to suggest a decision that was never completed. Enough space for light to enter during the day. Enough space for air to pass through if it ever chooses to move. The curtains beside those windows hang quietly. They do not sway. They do not respond to the open glass or the stillness around them. They fall straight down, lightly folded, untouched by time, untouched by wind. Beyond the windows, there is no sound, no distant traffic hums in the background, no voices echo faintly from outside, no footsteps pass by. The world beyond the glass feels distant, not because it is far away, but because it no longer seems connected. It is as though the building exists slightly apart from everything else, occupying a space that the rest of the world no longer enters. Time outside continues, but here it behaves differently. Inside the hallway, moments do not move forward in a straight line. They stretch gently and quietly, without resistance. Seconds feel longer without becoming heavy. Minutes pass without being noticed. The shadow of the piano rests against the wall near the music room. It holds its shape carefully, neither growing nor fading. It does not tremble with delight. It does not shift as time passes. Other shadows linger in the hallway as well. They remain fixed where they are, as if they were placed deliberate and never adjust. They do not lengthen. They do not shorten. They simply exist, consistent and calm. The clock at the far end of the corridor still hangs in its place. Its hands are visible, resting where they should be. But it makes no sound. There is no ticking to mark the passing of time. No subtle reminder that the moments are slipping away. Without sound, the clock becomes just another object, another shape within the hallway. It no longer measures anything. It only remains. The door to the music room stays closed, not locked, not sealed, just closed, as if it has always been that way and never felt the need to change. Nothing in the hallway suggests that it should open. Nothing suggests that it should stay closed either. It simply holds its position, quiet and undecided. The space feels patient, not waiting for something to happen, but content with nothing happening at all. There is no sense of anticipation in the air, no expectation that something will arrive or depart. Sound feels distant here. Even imagined sound, every noise that could exist in this place seems to have decided not to appear. And in that absence, the hallway continues unchanged, uninterrupted. The pool remains cool beneath unseen footsteps that never come. The walks keep the color, the lights keep their glow. Nothing shifts, nothing resolves. And in that stillness, the space continues to exist exactly as it is, without witnesses, without purpose, without urgency. The hallway no longer feels observed in the way it once did. Not because someone has left, but because the space itself seems to have stopped paying attention to its own existence. It remains present without checking itself against anything else, without comparing its current state to what it used to be. The walls are still standing where they have always been, yet their edges feel softer now, less defined. Corners no longer assert themselves as boundaries. They blend gently into one another, as if the idea of separation has slowly faded through repetition. The floor stretches forward beneath the lights, smooth and uninterrupted. Its length is difficult to measure, not because it changes, but because distance no longer demands to be understood. What appears close does not invite approach. What appears far does not require effort. Everything exists at the same quiet level of importance. The lights above remain on, steady and unchanging. Their glow spreads evenly across the corridor, touching walls and floors without emphasis. They do not highlight specific details. They do not guide attention. They simply illuminate what is already there. Shadows no longer feel distinct. The shadow of the piano, somewhere beyond the closed door, still exists, but its outline has softened. It does not press itself against the wall. It does not insist on being noticed. It rests there quietly, blending into the surface behind it. Other shadows follow the same pattern. They remain present, but they no longer stand apart from their surroundings. They are no longer shapes that draw the eye. They are subtle variations in tone, barely separate from the walls that hold them. The air feels slightly denser than before, not heavy, not thick, but evenly settled. It presses gently against the space without resistance. There is no sense of movement within it, and no sense of stillness either. It simply remains consistent. Breath passes through the hallway without sound. If there is movement, it leaves no trace behind. The air accepts it and releases it without response. Along the corridor, the windows remain as they were. They no longer feel open or closed. They exist somewhere between those states, as if the distinction itself has lost meaning over time. They allow light when there is light to allow. They allow air only if air chooses to move. The curtains beside them hang quietly untouched. They do not sway, they do not react. They fold straight down, softly folded, as if they have always been meant to remain that way. Outside does not announce itself. It does not feel silent. It feels absent. The idea of sound from beyond the glass no longer arises, not as something expected, and not even as something missing. The building no longer waits for the outside world to arrive or return. Time behaves differently here. It does not move forward in a clear direction. It does not pause completely. It stretches gently, overlapping with itself, allowing moments to exist without clear beginnings or endings. Seconds do not follow one another in a strict sequence. They blend, soften, and lose their edges, becoming less distinct the longer they remain. The clock at the far end of the hallway still hangs in place. Its hands are visible, resting where they should be, but they carry no authority. There is no ticking to suggest progress, no sound to suggest loss. Without motion or sound, the clock becomes a shape rather than a function. It remains present, but it no longer measures anything. The hallway does not require measurement. The door to the music room remains closed, not locked, not sealed, simply closed, without intention or resistance. It does not invite curiosity. It does not suggest caution. It exists as a boundary that no longer needs meaning. Whatever lies beyond the door does not press against it, and the door does not push back. They coexist quietly without tension. Nothing in the hallway suggests that something should happen next. There is no anticipation in the air, no expectation waiting to be fulfilled. The space feels patient, but not in the sense of waiting. It feels complete in its current state. The walls do not ask to be noticed. The floor does not guide movement. The light does not search for attention. Everything remains as it is, without explanation and without urgency. The hallway no longer reflects on itself. It does not question its stillness. It does not compare its present to state to its past. It simply remains unchanged and unobserved, continuing quietly without the need to be remembered. The sound returned without warning, not as melody at first, but as a presence. It existed in space before it could be identified, a faint vibration barely separating itself from silence. Something between a note and a memory of one. The building did not respond. The walls remained fixed. The lights above the corridor continued their quiet hum. Then the piano revealed itself. One key, then another. Each sound arrived with a measured distance between them, as if the instrument were carefully deciding whether the next note was necessary. There was no rhythm meant to guide the sequence, no familiar structure, no pattern that suggested intention. The piano was not performing. It was not rehearsing. It was simply allowing sound to happen. The music room remained unchanged. The door stayed closed. The glass panel reflected only the corridor behind it. Inside, the piano sat beneath the tall windows, its surface dark, absorbing what little light reached it. The bench had not moved. No hand rested on the keys. No shadow leaned over the instrument. Nothing occupied the space where a body should have been. And yet the sound continued. Each note carried a slight delay, as though the air itself needed time to accept it. The sound did not travel outward. It stayed close to the piano, clinging to the space around it. The melody repeated, but imperfectly. A note arrived sooner than before. Another hesitated, stretching longer than expected. The piano did not correct itself. There was no mistake to fix, no wrongness to resolve, only variation. The air in the room felt dense, though unchanged, not heavier in a physical sense, but resistance, as if sound encountered something unseen before fading. Dust lay undisturbed across the lid of the piano. It did not tremble with vibration. It did not shift when the note emerged. Sound passes through the room without leaving a mark. The melody reached a familiar place, the point where it usually softened, where the silence normally followed. But silence did not arrive. Instead, the final note bent downward, losing its certainty. Not enough to break, just enough to feel incomplete. It lingered, thinning as it faded, until it became impossible to tell whether it was still present or already gone. For a moment there was nothing, not silence, but the absence of continuation. Then the piano answered itself. A lower note emerged, distant and restrained. It did not connect to the melody that came before. It did not introduce something new. It existed alone. Time in the corridor moved forward. Somewhere a clock advanced its mechanism. Lights remained powered. The building followed its schedule. But inside the music room, progression had no meaning. The sound did not acknowledge time. It did not respond to it. The piano played as if moments were optional. The notes began to overlap slightly now, not enough to form harmony, just enough to create tension. The space between sounds narrowed, then widened again. It was not building toward anything. It was circling. The piano keys remained perfectly still. No movement disturbed their alignment. No pressure bent them downward. The instrument refused to reveal its source. A faint echo followed each note, though the room was not designed to produce one. The walls absorbed sound efficiently. They always had. But now, sound lingered longer than it should have. The echo did not belong to the room. The melody softened again, retreating into itself. Notes grew quieter, thinner, as if effort were required to maintain them. Still they continued. The piano did not stop because nothing told it to. There was no conclusion written into the sequence. No ending ended in the sound. Eventually, the notes spread farther apart. The pauses between them lengthened. Each silence stretched, uncertain whether it was temporary or final. One last note appeared. It did not resolve anything. It did not close the melody. It simply existed and then withdrew. The room returned to stillness, but the stillness felt altered, as if something has passed through and left no trace, except the knowledge that it could happen again. The sound did not return immediately. What remained was not silence, but a thinning of what had been there before. The room felt less occupied, not empty, simply reduced. The piano stood unchanged, yet something about it felt less present, as if part of its weight had been removed. The air around the instrument lost its density. The resistance that once held the sound slowly released its grip. Nothing moved, nothing shifted position, but the space no longer expected anything to happen. The room had adjusted. When the next sound appeared, it was weaker, a single note, barely separated from the quiet beneath it. It did not linger. It did not echo. It faded almost as soon as it existed. The piano no longer held the room's attention. It had become an object again. Wood, metal, keys aligned in their familiar order. The sound felt accidental now, as if it could stop at any moment, without consequence. Another note emerged, lower this time. It carried not intention, no memory of the earlier melody. The space accepted it and let it go immediately. Time resumed its influence. The corridor outside followed its slow rhythm. Electric systems functioned as designed. Nothing resisted progression anymore. Inside the room, the piano no longer existed outside of time. The pauses between sounds grew longer, so long they began to feel permanent. When a note finally appeared, it felt distant, as if it came from memory rather than space. The melody did not attempt to return. There was no effort to repeat, no correction, only fragments, insulated, incomplete, fading on arrival. The piano no longer insisted on being heard. Eventually, even the fragments stopped. The room did not react. It did not acknowledge the change. It simply continued being a room. The piano remained silent, unremarkable. Nothing suggested that the sound had ever come from it at all. Only the quiet persisted, steady, neutral, untroubled. The space settled into what it was meant to be. Did not change after the silence settled. It remained as it always had, walls, floor, ceiling, occupying space without intention. The piano stood where it belonged, indistinguishable from any other object left behind after use. No sound followed, not because it was forbidden, but because nothing required. The air stayed still, dust rested undisturbed. Whatever had passed through the room left no demand to be remembered. Time continued forward without resistance. The building resumed its ordinary state. Quiet systems operating, spaces waiting without expectation. The music room had no tension, no echo waited to return. The piano no longer suggested sound. It was simply present. Nothing indicated that it had ever been otherwise. The room accepts this version to itself without hesitation. Silence remained. Not empty, not heavy, just steady. The space continued, unchanged, unobserved, at rest.